The Insect Glaive is probably one of the most unique weapons ever introduced in Monster Hunter and gaming as a whole. It's a weapon that's very reminiscent of a bow staff, but also a halberd, but we also have the Kinsect, which is kind of like a companion that is used with this weapon. It does have some puppeteer attacks ingrained in the weapon, but that's not really the main point of this weapon. This is a weapon that, in my opinion, has really unrivaled mobility. It's one of the top weapons for getting mounts against monsters. It really shines against aerial monsters in general, with the ability to launch yourself into the air at any time for some aerial combat. There's a reason why I put a weapon of heaven and earth on the thumbnail of this video. This is a weapon that could take you into the skies for aerial combat, but also dishes out a ton of damage on the ground. Being one of the only weapons that has access to air attacks at will just makes it all the more unique. And the general attack and flow style of this weapon is pretty easy once you have it down. But not only that, this weapon has some really good attack range, whether it is through the grounded attacks or by vaulting and dashing through the air to get to the monster. But there's a lot more that the Insect Glaive has to offer, and that's why I'm going to take us through the training area, where I'm going to show off the attacks and the moves and combos in the Insect Glaive, but go over all the different buffs that this weapon can collect with the Kinsect itself, and talk about the different combinations of the buffs themselves and why they're so important. So let's hop over to the training area and see just what this weapon can pull off. But as this is a very stylish weapon, I feel like we need to leave in style as well. Okay, so first things first with the Insect Glaive, we actually have two normal Y or triangle attacks that we can do. We can do it with a neutral stance and press Y to get this attack, the Rising Slash combo. But if we hold the stick in any direction and press Y or triangle, we'll get this thrust. This is important because this has a lot of reach, while the Rising Slash combo has reach that's not quite as far. But the Rising Slash combo is a lot stronger, and it does take longer to come out though. Now this is important because both of these attacks can go into the basic Y and triangle combo. We can do the Rising Slash combo and keep pressing it to get this attack. Or we can hold the stick forward and get our thrust to get into it a little quicker. Next we have the B or circle button. This is the wide sweep into the overhead smash. This is a combo is very important, and we're going to go over why later. Next, if we move the stick in any direction and press the circle button, we'll get the leaping slash. It's reminiscent of the overhead slash, but you go a lot further and it's got some pretty good distance, honestly. This can also be done out of running. If you press the triangle button, it'll do the same thing. Now that's it for the basic combos, because as we talked about earlier, this weapon can be buffed with multiple different buffs that your Kinsect can actually extract, and we're going to go over those in just a second. But first, we need to talk about why this weapon is so awesome: the ability to vault into the air at any time. Now, aerial combat with the Insect Glaive is a little awkward at first. You'll notice that you can't actually just like move around freely in the air. It really is like a pole vault in real life. The direction that you do it is the direction you're kind of locked into. But with the use of stamina and pressing the X button, we can actually get a dash in any direction. If we don't input any direction with the left stick, we'll actually just go forward again. But you can do it to like totally go backward. You can go to the side. You can do anything you really want. You can get out of the monster's way of an attack and all that. Now, when it comes to the aerial combat, we can press the Y or triangle button to get a regular jumping slash. This can be done in any direction, independent of like the trajectory that you're going. Next, we have the jumping advancing slash. This is done by pressing the B or circle button. Your hunter will move a very far distance, and as long as it hits an attack, you'll actually get an extra jump boost in the air as long as you can, well, land the attack. It doesn't matter what you land the attack on. You can actually do this infinitely too, as you can see. But if you don't land an attack, you will be, well, back on the ground again, as the only way to get that extra little boost is if you do indeed land the attack. You can actually do this pattern and combo over and over, as long as you have the stamina, but actually you will be locked out of it on the 5th hit. You can get up to 4 of these jumping advancing slashes. And we got the 4th one, boom. And on the 5th one here, you'll see, even though it hits, you are locked out of doing any more aerial combat. I guess it's a way to balance the weapon. It kind of sucks, honestly. I wish you could stay in the air infinitely, but oh well. Before we get into the buffs, let's talk about the Kinsect a little bit. If you press the right trigger on any controller when you're sheathed, your Kinsect will fly out in the direction that you are facing, quite a fair distance. You can actually call it back just by sheathing your weapon again. You'll notice that in the top left, I actually got a white little buff on my number 2 icon. The number 1, 2, and 3 icons all are different buffs that the Kinsect can get for you. Now, the buff that's called back to you is different depending on where the Kinsect hits and lands on the monster. We just got the white buff, as you can see. The white buff is typically gotten by hitting the legs or the arms or even the wings. You can get the red buff by hitting the head of a monster. I believe if we actually hit the post right here, that counts as a red buff. Finally, there's only one more buff to collect. That is the orange buff, and that is typically gotten from the chest or the back. The orange buff is a little awkward to actually get sometimes, but it's still very important as well. Now, there's multiple ways to get these buffs. First off, as we said, you can press the right trigger while you're sheathed. The other ways of doing it is you can actually hold the left trigger and you can aim in a direction. You can actually mark the target that you want to hit. Your Kinsect will take a second to hit it, but once it does, you can call it back at any time. But it'll also just keep attacking, as you can see, that same spot that we hit. And these dust clouds are relevant, but we'll get to them in just a little bit here. Another way to do it is if you're up close to the monster, you can actually just press the right trigger, and you'll do an attack to mark the target. Last, we have the mark out of the air. If we press the right trigger, we'll do a descending thrust attack that leads into a sweeping combo that your hunter will do automatically. It's only done by pressing this one button. It also has some really good distance. And now while my stamina bar is a little low, no, not my stamina bar, the Kinsect actually has its own stamina bar. It's listed right below the buffs, the 1, 2, and 3 icons that you can see there. It slowly regains over time as long as your weapon is sheathed. Well, actually not that your weapon is sheathed, but your Kinsect is put away onto your arm. If your Kinsect's stamina runs out, it'll come back to you regardless of what you're doing. The stamina bar actually isn't too big of an issue with the Kinsect, with your Insect Glaive, so don't pay too much attention to it, but that is what that is for. Let's get into combos with the Insect Glaive with the damage buff, though. So to get our damage buff, the quickest way, I believe, if you're like running toward the head of a monster, just press the right trigger. But once we do have the red buff, our attack combos actually change a little bit. We'll get an extra little hit on most of the attacks. So doing the triangle or Y button leads into the strong version of all of these attacks that we did before at the beginning of the training session. The rising slash combo becomes a strong rising slash combo. Our thrust becomes a strong thrust and is a double hitting attack. Our circle or B combo becomes extremely powerful at this point. Now we can chain the triangle and B combo attacks together. If we do the one triangle or Y attack and go straight into B, we'll get the finishing animation actually. But if you want more of an infinite combo, I suggest pressing Y or triangle 2 times. And then pressing B or circle. This can be done infinitely, and this is your best bet at like sustained damage against a monster. If the monster is getting back up or something like that, though, and you are doing this like infinite type of combo, you can't just finish by pressing B after the final B in your like 3-step combo, as you can see there, instead of continuing it like before. Now, if we have the red buff and we are in the air, our Y or triangle attack actually becomes very useful compared to the normal one. Our circle or B attack also does a flurry of attacks in the middle of it, but still ends the same. But of course, it can only be done 4 times, and on the 5th time, you will lose your aerial combat. For wall running attacks, there's actually not a whole lot. We can press Y to get the jumping slash, but we can get the descending thrust out of a jump. Something that you can do, though, is that you can actually climb onto the wall after midair evade. As long as you're holding the stick in the... Oh, holy shit, I'm floating! Damn, the Insect Glaive is broken. But from here, you can see our options in the top right are to just drop down or to press the left stick and A in any direction to do a jump, quote unquote. If we just press drop down, well, we'll just drop down. But if we press the left stick and A in any direction, it'll say it gets us a jump, but for some reason our character will also just drop down off of it. You have to press the A or X button again right after that to get your actual midair evade. It's kind of odd. I'm not really sure why you even have to do that extra little step in there. Can somebody correct me if I'm wrong in the comments? I am not sure what the purpose of that is. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong. Ledge jumping attacks with the Insect Glaive are actually a little bit more useful. We have all the attacks that we can do basically out of just being in the air. You can see we have the jumping slash in the top right. We have the B or circle button for the jumping advancing slash to get our combo started. We can do a mid-air evade. We can do the downward thrust, of course. Very handy stuff. And last but not least, we actually have the claw attack, which I just realized I forgot to mention. Although I usually do go over claw attacks in the end of my video. But since we are talking about jumping ledge attacks, I guess we'll get it out of the way now. If you press the left trigger instead of the right trigger for the downward thrust, you'll actually get a downward claw attack. It's a very handy tool to clamber onto the monster immediately out of the air, and is honestly, I think, one of the best claw attacks in the game for weapons. This can be done, of course, out of, typical vaulting. Next, we have sliding attacks with the Insect Glaive. We can press Y or triangle to get the jumping advancing slash. We can actually cancel our slide by pressing the right trigger to shoot our Kinsect out. And now with the red buff for the sliding, if we press Y or triangle, we get the strong advancing slash. The Insect Glaive, it doesn't have a whole ton of attack combos or even flashy attacks, actually. I like to consider the Insect Glaive kind of like the dual blades. You're more like dancing with the monster and doing some of the same attacks over and over. But you're continuously doing stuff to like stay aerial, stay mobile, and all that. Really good stuff, honestly. Insect Glaive is actually a very fun weapon. And combining your like buffs together and stuff like that, and having like a mode that you want to get into, it's something that's very unique to the Insect Glaive, especially the ability to vault into the air at a moment's notice. The only other weapon that can really do this is kind of like the sword and shield, but even then, it doesn't really have aerial combat. It's kind of more a part of a combo. This weapon actually gives you like mid-air evades and stuff and actual aerial combat. As long as you can keep the combat going with direct hits to the monster, it's a pretty fun playstyle, honestly. After you're sending your Kinsect out, or after it's been out for a while, you can, of course, sheath your weapon to get it back. You can also hold the left trigger to be in kind of like a Kinsect stance, as we said before, when you can shoot and like direct your Kinsect to spots that you want it to go. But you can press the Y triangle button to have it actually attack for you. Kind of like a puppet playstyle. And you can press the circle or B button to call it back yourself without sheathing your weapon. Going back and talking about the buffs with the Insect Glaive, the red is by far the most important buff. This is what gets your combos, well, more attacks actually, by doing the double hits and all that. It also gives you a stronger aerial game, of course, leading to stronger attacks in the air. The white buff gives you faster movement speed and a higher vaulting height as well. And the white buff gives a 5% defense boost and knockback resistance. Obviously, as you can see, you still get hit by like bombs and stuff like that. And of course, there's the green buff. This is done by hitting the tail of a monster. I'm not sure where I need to hit in the training area, so we're hitting this monster in the tail. And now what's more interesting is that there's actually a different combination of the buffs. If you have red and white at the same time, it gives you a 10% attack increase. If you have orange and white at the same time, it gives you a 10% defense increase. And if you have all three buffs collected at the same time, red, white, and orange, it gives you 15% extra attack and it gives you 10 extra defense, which, I don't know, it's kind of negligible. So as you see here, we're at 12 attack. If we do collect the red buff, and then the white buff after that, our attack has increased by a whole 10%, leading up to 1401 attack power. Wow, God, that's a lot for the Insect Glaive, man. Now our defense is 1124 at the bottom. Since I already have the red and white buff, I can't really show the white and the orange by itself unless I wait another like couple minutes. But if we collect the orange buff after this, you'll see our defense increase as well. But that's because it's a combination of the white and the orange. And just like that, we shot up to 1236 defense. But as soon as you have the buffs, you cannot actually refresh it just by like grabbing a buff again. It simply does not work. You can grab the buff all you want and call it back to you. You see the red is dwindling right there. Actually, all three of them are. It doesn't matter what we do. We can't just get the buff duration extended. Even right there, we called it back right before it ended. So grabbing all three buffs at the same time right away isn't like optimal always. It kind of depends on how you play the Insect Glaive, but it's just a nice little thing to know that you can't just refresh the duration as long as you keep collecting your buffs. Useful skills with the Insect Glaive are like skills like Power Prolonger. Level 1 gives 10%, level 2 gives 20%, and level 3 gives an extra 40% extra time to all of your buffs. That means that the triple buff that you get, it normally lasts about 90 seconds, but it can shoot all the way up to 126 with level 3 Power Prolonger. So quite good. An extra 36 seconds on top of that is really, really important. Something that's also not known is that the flinch freeze skill gives you a whole stack of earplugs, windproof, and tremor resistance as long as you have the triple buff active. It's reminiscent of older Monster Hunter tiles with the Insect Glaive, as in Monster Hunter World, the orange buff would normally give you like earplugs just like in general. It doesn't do that in this game, but the addition of the flinch free skill with the triple buff is a way to get some of that stuff back. But it's something that only the Insect Glaive could do, so it's very handy, and I suggest that you search it up yourself to get the actual details of how it works. And now we're going to talk about slinger ammo with the Kinsect. With the addition of Iceborne, we got the Kinsect charge attack. Or, well, it's not really a charge attack. It's an ability that your Kinsect can do. You can essentially feed it slinger ammo. As you can see, though, we have a bomb pod equipped to our slinger. The different type of slinger ammo that you pick up gives all kinds of different durations of buffs and different abilities of buffs. There is a spirit buff and there is a power buff with the Insect Glaive with this Kinsect charge. But if you hold the left trigger and we press the Y or triangle button at the same time, we'll feed our Kinsect this slinger ammo. It's kind of quick to see, but as you can see, we have two new buffs. One is the spirit and one is the power buff. The spirit buff immediately restores all of our Kinsect stamina, and it, of course, extended the stamina bar a lot further, as you can see. It also makes all the buffs and even the triple buff last a lot longer. It lasts actually up to a 50% longer while you have this spirit buff to your Kinsect. The power buff of the Kinsect charge increases your Kinsect's damage itself by a multiplier of 1.5 and the elemental power by 3.5, which is kind of massive, honestly. It also increases dust strength by 1.15 multiplier. It increases the intervals between dust deposits that are left out in the area. It also makes the extracts last 50% longer in general. And the power buff also buffs buffs by 50% on the duration time, just like the spirit buff, but it won't actually do anything for the triple buff combination. You need to have the spirit buff to get that one. There's actually a useful guide by Supercalifragilistic over on Steam. I'll have a link to it in the description down below, but he has a lot of this info listed, and he also put together quite a good guide that I had to reference myself just to double check some of my information a couple times. Now, the most important thing with the slinger ammo, though, is it'll either give you the spirit buff or the power buff individually, only one at a time. Unless you specifically have the Kinsect bonus, the spirit and strength boost, any other Kinsect bonus will only grant you one of these Kinsect buffs. So that is something very important to take into account when you're thinking about, well, your build with the Kinsect that you want and whether you want both buffs at the same time. Just by feeding it one little bit of slinger ammo, you can get both of these buffs at the same time. So something very important to think about, actually. And since we're already speaking about the Kinsects, if we go into manage Kinsects at the smithy, we have a few different options. We can nurture a Kinsect, we can change the elements of a Kinsect, we can also purchase Kinsects. Nurturing a Kinsect, there's two main Kinsects that you can nurture, and there's two main Kinsects that you can buy. One is the cold drone. The first type is a cold drone. You can see the attack type is a severing attack type, meaning that this can cut tails and all that. And the maul drone is your blunt type damage. You can also see that they have different dust effects. The cold drone has poison, while the maul drone has healing. Different types of dust clouds can come out of your Kinsect's attacks, and they'll depend on what kind of dust effect that you have. There's 4 different dust types. There's poison dust type, all the way to like paralysis and to blast, wherever that is, blast right here. And you can even get healing dust clouds. The dust clouds that come out of your Kinsect's attacks can be attacked by you or even other players. Healing, of course, is a dust cloud that'll heal you and your allies. Blast will, of course, deal blast element damage. And as you can also see on the right, the Kinsects have different levels of power, speed, and healing. The power stat dictates how much damage the Kinsect itself does. It doesn't really give you an attack boost. The speed is general Kinsect's speed. It makes it faster for gathering your extracts and stuff like that. Having a high level of speed on your Kinsect is generally favored by most players, and the healing gives you better extracts from healing and better healing clouds and stuff like that as well. But like I said, most people favor the speed Kinsect and maybe power and then healing after that. You can also see that every single Kinsect in here has an element of none. That's because you can actually come back to the Kinsect elements and you can change your Kinsect's element to whatever you would like. Now on a high ranking Kinsect, if you have no element equipped, our power is level 17, but you could put an element of your choosing on it. You do get a little bit reduced attack power on your Kinsect. I'm not actually sure the damage numbers and if it's worth it to put an element, but if it decreases by only 1 level to give you a whole level 16 of fire or water or such and such, it's probably worth it. I have the dragon element equipped on my Nexus Dragon Soul Kinsect because, I don't know, it just seems fitting, am I right? All in all, I feel like the Insect Glaive is a really cool and unique weapon, but it's not really for a specific crowd in general. Actually, this weapon has one of the higher usage rates in Monster Hunter World in general. Higher than the hammer, the hunting horn, and those weapons have been around way longer than the Insect Glaive. I think the appeal of the Insect Glaive is, well, being kind of the only staff type weapon in the game that has its own moveset in the air, but also has a unique ability using this Kinsect that you have attached with you to give you different buffs, which is just kind of a very unique playstyle at the end of the day. There's not really another weapon that's like it in Monster Hunter, not even similar to it, honestly. This is a weapon I feel that is for a crowd that wants to have a ton of mobility, but mobility through very unique means with the aerial dashes and the aerial attacks themselves. But as I said in the beginning of this video, this is a weapon that just has kind of unrivaled mobility in my opinion. It's one of the top contenders for mounts. It really shines against aerial monsters, has access to air attacks at will, it has really good attack while you're on the ground with your buffs, of course. And I think with the addition of the Iceborne skills with the Kinsect charge, this weapon just got made even cooler, man. So after watching this guide, what do you think of the Insect Glaive? Are you an expert that tuned in to see what I had to say about the Insect Glaive? Or if you're a new player with the Insect Glaive, what's the most important thing that you learned from this guide? Is there anything I missed? And what weapon would you like to see next for my guides for Monster Hunter World? Please let me know in the comments down below. I try to get to most of them. I take all of your comments into consideration for my future content. And if you're watching this video on the day of its upload, you can actually see the Insect Glaive live in action right here on my channel, as I'm hosting a safi'jiiva live stream event where all are welcome to join if you need help with safi'jiiva, but the Insect Glaive also shines on really big monsters, so if you want to see it in action, chances are that I am live right now as you're watching this video. So come pop in and say hi. And now that we're finally at the end of the video, I have a big favor to ask of you. I humbly ask you to consider subscribing to the channel. I have a big goal of hitting 30,000 subscribers by the end of the year, but more importantly, I'm trying to hit it before Monster Hunter Wilds, so every little bit helps. But that's it for today, guys and gals. Hope you enjoyed the video. This has been Terroriza, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace!